I can promote it and maybe get you some reviews.
Okay, I'll go look for that. Hello, audience. This is the Renemy Kylis Hangouts, and with me, I have Nicholas with me. Hello, Nicholas. Woo.
Hello.
Okay.
So, hello everyone who's watching. Nicholas Goroff, the Wizard of Cause. I have a YouTube channel, as it turns out.
Yeah, ironically, when I first found you, I first found you through Twitter. Yeah, ironically.
Yes.
Let's see. That should lead them to the video.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'll share that out right now. Yeah, so you found me on Twitter.
Yeah, I saw you talking about politics. You were talking about free. You were talking about both free health and you were talking about free college education.
Oh, yeah, in respect to my support for Sanders.
Yeah, you were talking about Bernie Sanders, and I really liked your opinions because I really enjoyed seeing your opinions on that. Yeah.
Well, what did you like specifically?
Um, well, I also agree about your arguments about free education because not everybody could afford to go to college. College in America is extremely expensive. It's like $26,000 to go to college.
It's insanely expensive. It's almost unaffordable for most people. And if you have shitty credit, for instance, if you have credit which has been affected by, in my case, medical bills before they changed the law, but if you have credit card debt, if you have financing debt of some kind, if perhaps even your credit was sort of maligned because of identity theft, or because perhaps you at one time got a retail credit card and didn't completely understand the interest rate and canceled it, but then had charges apply to that new interest rate and all these things. Um, if you're not from a position where you have a valid cosigner with a good credit rating and lots of money, then what you end up with is you end up having to self-finance through loans, which are based upon your own credit, if they accept it. And if you're lucky, you end up to your eyeballs in debt. And if you're unlucky, they allow you to take a few semesters until those loans run out based on the bank's estimation of your worth and value. And you end up stuck with a student loan bill for an incomplete degree. So it's an insane process, and especially given the fact that, I mean, higher education right now is facing some extraordinary challenges, some very disgusting challenges, I'd say, especially given like it more geared towards the environment on campus with the hypersensitive social justice campaigners out there trying to sort of, wrap everything in emotional bubble wrap. But aside from that, a higher education, having it's not just about the degree, but actually having the advanced education in a specific field of study is what can allow or prevent you from entering that field. And so we're talking about anything from medicine and science and mathematics and all of those, all the way up, through the genuine liberal arts, such as literature, writing, just even the creative endeavors which can be cultured in college, as long as they're not just being laden with ideological conditions. For a college student to graduate and enter the world, they need a well-rounded view of what they've been presented with, as well as the encouragement to question what it is that they see and experiment and probe and test it. And between the environment on college campuses now, with the social justice scene and the financing schemes which are preventing so many from getting in, while indenturing so many more to banks as a result of that. Um, it's turned what is a national asset into an outright false commodity, I'd say.
Yeah, because the few problems that I see is that nowadays you need college for nearly everything now, even things that previously didn't require a college education. Like you now need a college education to be a substitute teacher, which previously was just a high school diploma. You now need to be college educated for clerical work, secretary work, which is very easy to do. Is something that I did as a teenager, but you need a college education for that. But not only that, but there are courses that it's not going to pay well. Like there's gender study courses where people take up gender studies. They wasted their money and time in college and end up broke. And there are a bunch of other degrees like theology where you're just studying to be a Christian minister, which is pretty much a useless degree. So
Well, I might disagree there, and this is coming from a very staunch atheist, as I am. But in respect to like a theology degree, like if you become a theologian, like you can become an academic, one who studies theology and divinity. From honestly a rational perspective, and this is something I've recently been introduced to. A coworker of mine who was hired on my day job, the beer shop I work at. He's a former minister, and he's studying divinity, philosophy, and theology. And while naturally, I mean, like we have plenty of conversations, and it's great because none of them even become heated. They're just honest, open conversations, and I question him about the nature of divinity and the existence of God and everything else. And he acknowledges the questions and he acknowledges the shortcomings in his answers, and he goes on to explore what he feels that faith and the nature of religion provides society. And it's a fine course of study. In fact, I'd even go as far as saying that gender studies, if it wasn't so mired in this ideological madness, this obsession with victimhood and oppression and power structures and all of this, and it actually studied more in which the ways, for instance, that gender roles and the the two sexes who fit into those gender roles in various degrees, how they interact with one another, the roles that they play, the nature of male versus male and female interactions. If it was a genuine study of a thing rather than an attempt to propagate a desired narrative, I'd say it was a perfectly valid course of study that could go academic. The only problem is everything's been infused with ideology. We've gotten to a point now where media studies and communications, which those ideally, if you're going to get those degrees, you're going to end up working in like the back room of a TV studio or perhaps at a PR firm or something like that. But you'll have some grounded understanding of the field that you studied. Instead, what we find is that they're just these breeding grounds for sycophants, people with staunch ideologies which need to be propagated at all costs. And so, yeah, I mean, I honestly, these days, I feel I don't feel much in the way of pity for those who went out and got, they went to college, as most kids do, probably with no defined idea of what they wanted to do. And then they found themselves into gender studies, and they found, instead of a career path, they found a home for their sense of righteous indignation over the absence of power that they feel that they are owed. And so I have no pity for those people, but I would say that, I think higher education remains as important as it's ever been. And I think that affording people the chance to realize their potential by going on to college without the worry of crushing debt or, financial, being driven out of your studies due to finances and then being billed for them. Those are essential.
yeah, I'm just saying that, like, I think that the nowadays the purpose of going to college is to get a good job, like get a good job as a doctor, lawyer, surgeon, to just have a good job from it.
Whatever it could be, yeah. I mean, the idea. I mean, that was one of the, I'd say almost one of the more infuriating things when I was in school. Because when I went to college, I enjoyed the study. Now I had ambitions. I wanted to go and get a job with my degree, and I had ambitions on where I wanted to take it. But it was more the course of the study that I enjoyed, the access to the resources, so that I could, dig into the questions that I had in my mind, and the ability to sort of explore those more deeply. And then you talk to other people, usually kids fresh out of high school, parents are paying for the college, cars paid for by mommy and daddy, all that shit. And you'd see these kids and you ask, well, what do you want to do? Oh, I just want to get a good job. Well, what is a good job? I mean, are you going to be one of these, like dead-eyed middle class drones who just kind of goes through life working day in, day out until you're done? And I mean, if that's the case, that's fine, because society sadly needs those people. But if you're studying a dynamic field of study, such as political science or social science, or something that requires really strong critical faculties, and you're only in it to get a job, whereas in the other half of the class is in this because they want to propagate their agenda, what we come to is this point in which, these studies mean nothing, because half of the class is there just because they have nothing else to do. The other half is there because they want to manipulate the credentials they get from studying this in order to advance their ideals. And then maybe you have this slim majority who's just a slim minority who's actually just genuinely curious about what it all means.
Well, unfortunately, the way society works, you have to go to college if you really do want to be a lawyer, a surgeon, a doctor. College is necessary for you to have those careers. So when people go to college, they usually go to college to get a job.
Mm-hmm. No, but I mean, here's the thing. Like, I would like, if I have a lawyer on my side in court, in which I've unfortunately had to go to court with a lawyer multiple times, but I would really rather that lawyer be a jurist. Somebody who entered the study of law because they found it fascinating, because they wanted to practice law, because they found the questions of the malleable nature of case precedent and so on interesting, and that they wanted to be able to bring their intellect to that field. I would rather have that lawyer than somebody who went through it knowing that, oh, well, if I get a law degree, I'll have a great job. I'd rather have a real lawyer. I would rather have a genuine jurist on my side than somebody who simply went and studied law just so that they could have a job.
Well,
but this is the question here. I mean, like, I had ambitions for law school myself. Now, I was denied the ability to go to law school primarily because, in the course of my studies, when I got to the decent undergrad university that I was studying at, they were able to let me in using, loan and loan schemes and such. But then once that had come through, about after a semester and a half, I was told, all right, you're going to need to come up with 14 grand or you can't continue going to school here. Well, that doesn't really help. And then I've met a whole series of lawyers who just had their way paid through, and you can quiz them on just even the most basic concepts of things like constitutional law or tort law, and they're fucking clueless. Like, you can paint them into a corner in argument without breaking a sweat. And I think to myself, like, these are lawyers. These are past the par lawyers with juris doctorates and all of that. And I've got myself an associate's degree and some credits, and I'm working in retail. I think ultimately what it comes down to is the denial of higher education to people based on financial means is the denial to society at large of talented professionals and intellectuals who could genuinely contribute to society, as opposed to the and you hear this often from the usually like conservative, more libertarian right, that those who are working menial jobs, those who are not well educated, etc., are just not contributing to society. And truth be told, I mean, you can take a whole host of top end professionals and can honestly say they're not contributing a damn thing because they're just going through the motions and collecting a paycheck. Whereas there could have been legions of brilliant legal or medical minds in the field who never got the chance simply because they couldn't afford to try.
That reminds me of something. I have a friend. Uh, he um he got paid. Kids paid him to do their homework for him. So I could believe that there were people who are doctors and lawyers and don't know a thing, because my friend, he dropped out of college, but he would do everybody's college homework for them. He got paid good money too, just to do other people's homework.
Oh, I did that after college. I got paid a substantial amount of money, actually, in terms of my poverty, to write term papers for the wealthy but unfortunately idiotic students. That's a common thing too. You find out of work, under credentialized intellects doing work on the side and just milking these college kids. And I had normally, if I'm milking someone for a job of some kind, I might feel some guilt. But when I would take on like, oh, I need this term paper written, right? I'm not even an ounce of guilt. Like, no, all right, you want to cheat in college? Fine by me. I'm going to charge you every penny you can afford. And if you come back at me and say that your professor needs clarification on the points that you made and how you came to them because you didn't really see any of that in your previous work, I'm going to charge you double for those. I mean, that was the thing I did, and it's just sort of part of the black market of. I guess in a sense, it's the creation of a black market of intellect. Because if you're going to celebrate people who can afford to look like they're intellectual, meanwhile you're just going to sort of ignore and suppress those who may have a mind for a certain study, well then, in my eyes, by all means, I think those underprivileged poor fuckers who couldn't get the let's say the scholarship based on their nationality or their race or their gender, or couldn't otherwise just get in because maybe their mummies or daddies went to that school. I have absolutely no problem with those people taking full advantage of the lazy, feckless idiots who are taking up those class spaces. This is another reason that I think, I think that subsidized, publicly funded higher education is a good idea, is because it would obligate admissions to change their parameters of admission to focus more on merit and less on either legacy or wealth, or to a lesser extent, but an increasingly sort of, bizarre one, identity. Like, how long until we have, trans only scholarships? I mean, does someone really deserve to go to college simply because they're trans? Does someone simply deserve to go to college just because they're female, or because they're black, or Latino, or so on? We have these programs because the financial system around higher education is geared in a way to make sure that only those with the funds can make it in. If we take that away and make it a system in which those who are capable are accepted into institutions because it is paid for by public funds, then the universities have to be far more selective into who they allow in, and they can do so based on merit. Is this person a good candidate for this law program, this medical program, this STEM program? Are they good for it? Can they do the work? Can they learn it? Can they make the grade? Is it worth the investment?
Yeah, this is why I think I agree with Sanders about free education. I do think that we should have free college education because
I would stop short in the future of saying free, because it's not free. It would be tax funded. It would be publicly subsidized. But
Yeah,
that itself, that itself, people will say, "Oh, you're milking taxpayers." Then you can turn around and say that if colleges manage to be as selective in their admissions as they are now with the public system, and they don't need to worry about placating donors and making the athletics department make the money that they need, you can say, yes, it is taxpayer subsidized, but it is a taxpayer investment in the future, because if it's done right, and this is what it ultimately comes down to with any government program, if it's done right, then what you end up with is a generation of highly educated, highly motivated individuals who want to go out and make a real mark in the fields that they've studied. I mean, short of that, it really is just that I'm going to college to get a good job, and there's going to be plenty of that, and that's absolutely necessary. But at the same time, you're going to get the cream of the crop when you invest in it, not when you just encourage it. I mean, let's consider the whole women in STEM initiatives that have been launched, right? Now, women by and large don't have the same interest in the STEM fields that men do. It's just been observed. And in instances when they've tried to put a quota in there saying you need this many female students in order to make it work, right? Like the female students would sign up because they'd be actively encouraged to by the department, but once they discovered what they were studying, the interest just wasn't there to maintain. And so you've got these, you've got these colleges right now, which are just desperate for whatever money they can get in, because they're, private for-profit institutions working at the behest of other private for-profit institutions, which rely on things, basically usury. And what you end up getting is this, series of, okay, we need to produce enough of the bare minimum, the base level of acceptance that we can make. We need to make at least this much, as opposed to actually having an environment where a student graduates from high school and you're going to have a graduating class, and there's going to be a huge swath of them who want nothing more than just a good, stable job that they can work to raise a family on, live comfortably with, and move on with life. They don't want their work to be their life. They just want a job that they can do and that they maybe don't hate, and they can do their lives on the side. And then on the other side, you have people who want to be defined by their profession. They want to be the best lawyer. They want to be the best doctor. They want to be the best engineer. They want to be the best clinical psychiatrist, whatever it might be. You don't encourage those potential bests who are really going to go at it tooth and nail and learn everything they can about what they're studying to be the absolute best in their field when they get out, so long as you're hinging all of their admissions based on their finances and their identity. If you make it a publicly subsidized thing, not free, but a public institution, a public good, then you in effect level that playing field, and you allow those who want to actually take those risks and take on those big challenges to really step up, because then you also remove that stigma about, I need to go out and be the best this and that so that I can show them, whoever they might be, that I'm not just a lazy whatever you have it, right? It's about people who are like genuinely interested, like, all right, I have the freedom to go and pursue whatever interest I have. I can pursue my interest. I can go and become the best at it that I can be. And then I can go out into the professional world and make my bones doing that.
yeah. Um, for me, another thing that bothers me about colleges is all the really rich brats yelling and screaming at their college professors, and trying to get their college professors fired because the college professor told a joke, or it's a-okay with offensive Halloween costumes. It's the um, moral superiority complex, the entitlement, the outright nastiness that you kind of see from college students, and you hear all these college professors getting fired over nothing, really.
I mean, that's our modern age of identity outrage politics. That's what we're faced with now. We're faced with a generation who think that the self and that the sense of security and so on, right, are what really defines their age. They feel that like that's their real struggle. They need to make themselves special. And I'm encouraged, honestly, by the fact that like media itself is by and large recognizing that this is a bunch of idiotic bullshit. That these hypersensitive college students, like, oh, I'm triggered and traumatized because somebody wrote Trump 2016 in chalk somewhere. Like, I'm sorry, like in the past, if you were that sensitive and that easy to trigger, they had padded rooms for you, right? That's what they had for you. You went into a nice padded room because you couldn't deal with reality, and you were something equating insane. But these days, everyone's just so damn coddled and so damn encouraged to just feel like they're right no matter what. It's led to this bullshit that we're seeing now. It's led to this nonsense where, yeah, like, oh, my professor said something that triggered me, I can have them fired. I'm sorry, in the past, no, you fucking can't. You need to suck it up, Buttercup. You need to be an adult now because that's what college is. It's grown-up school. You're not going to be protected from things that might offend and hurt you. And if you are offended or hurt, you might want to actually reevaluate your perspective on things. Because it could be that you're just weak and hopeless.
Yeah, and on the other end of the scale, you have kids. They're getting away with this too. You have kids wearing T-shirts that says "Kill Whitey" or "Kill all white people," and people are getting away with writing on college campuses like "White people deserve to die," "White people must die." They vandalizing the school with that. They're getting away with it. Or the incidents. I'm not sure if it was in Missouri or whatever, but that kid who like ran in front of a car, like who went in front of a car and it said that the car hit me because I'm black. It's like, no, the car didn't hit you. You walked in front of the car.
Yeah, the concerned students of Mizzou thing. Yeah. No, I mean this is the thing though, is it's a vain and failed effort to pick up what they see as the mantle of the civil rights movement. They think we need to be as righteous and raucous and as bold as crusaders as we can be to advance, what they were starting. But they have no idea what that is. I mean, Jonathan Butler, for instance, basically the entire thing seemed to be predicated on a swastika written in shit, ostensibly, and a pickup truck driving by him one time in which someone leaned out the window and yelled the word nigger. That would itself be an embarrassment to the former civil rights movement, because for one thing, during the time of the legitimate civil rights movement back in the 60s, if it was a pickup truck driving by a black man in a white town and they yelled the word nigger, that would often be followed up by violent action. And it would not only be that, but like the incidence of somebody screaming the word nigger at a black man was a daily occurrence. Now, assuming Butler's telling the truth, and I'm going to give him the benefit of that happened. He's talking about one incident in the course of his college career, which caused him to go on a hunger strike and declare that the entire university was institutionally racist. I mean, there are elements of racism in society which do need to be dealt with. Most of them are just sort of like leftovers from bygone eras when bad policies affected communities and remedy. These are not addressed by saying Black Lives Matter, by having protests where you march around self-righteously thumping your chest, screaming into a bullhorn that we have nothing to lose but our chains. I'm like, I'm sorry, son of a multimillionaire who's going to college and doesn't have to pay for it himself. How are you exactly in chains?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the worst thing that we have done in society is censorship, and censorship is pretty old. Like starting off with the N word, and you can't say the N word on TV. I don't think people should be spared from words. And the reason why I say that is because even if you even if a person says the okay, even if a person says person of color, a person could say all persons of color should die. A person, and it's not like less offensive if you say all black people should die, or all African Americans should die, or all people of color should die. And a person may not be politically correct, but the person could still be a cool person. And the thing about political correctness is just it makes the left feel like they're really doing something when you're not really doing anything at all. You're just censoring a word. That's not really helping anything. I don't really care if a white person says, nigger or not. I just care, if he's a decent person or not.
Well, it's a funny thing. I remember back in 2008, I was on the SEIU campaign in support of Obama. It was the New Hampshire for Healthcare campaign, right? And this campaign was made up of a mix of, hired off of the internet activists, canvassers, and union members. And the union members themselves are mostly 1099, which made them the nurses union. Most of them, well, let's say half of them were black women from either New York or from Boston, right? And the other half were, like I said, these professional activist types. I was amongst them, but most of them were recent grads with communications and global studies and gender studies degrees and so on. Over time, I found like their political correctness, and this was 2008 before all of this modern madness really kicked off. But I found their faux liberal progressivism, their feel good rhetoric, and all this shit. I just couldn't take it, right? And so one night while I'm riding along in the van filled with there's like 5 other people plus the driver, and Patty was our driver, and Patty was this hard-boiled New York nurse, took no shit from anybody, adored my daughter. And that, for some reason, I've discovered I seem to have an interesting sort of relationship with older black women. They're always like, "Oh, let me see that baby." Like they want to see my daughter, like she's their own granddaughter. Because that's how old women in general are, and old black women I notice are especially that, by and large. But I asked Patty one night because I knew she wouldn't mind, but I knew everyone else would. I said, "Patty, which term bothers you more, African American or nigger?" And without missing a beat, she's like, "Oh, honey, fucking, I ain't African fucking nothing. I'm a goddamn New York black woman. I'm an American. Don't give me this African shit. Call me nigger all day. I know where you're coming from. Call me an African American. Fuck off. I'm black." I'm like, well, that really wasn't for her as much as it was just enjoying like the fucking tense shoulders and like tight necks of everyone in the back who's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe he said that." But it's it's Lenny Bruce, right? Are you familiar with Lenny Bruce?
No.
Oh, you love him. You love Lenny. You love Lenny Bruce. You're gonna love Lenny Bruce. You're gonna love Bill Hicks. But it's the whole point of giving words power, and it's like the question of taking offense rather than giving it, because you can't give offense. You can't force offense on someone. It's something that somebody takes. They experience it on their own. They decide, I'm going to be offended by this. Yeah. And it's a funny thing I've noticed with the online culture is that, if you take a glance at it, let's take the recent, I don't know if you saw it, but the Microsoft AI bot, the chat bot they put on Twitter.
I don't know about that.
Oh, it was yesterday and it was hilarious. And I knew exactly how it would end at the moment I saw it start. Microsoft developed an artificial intelligence, a chatbot, something that learns from conversation and eventually starts mimicking that conversation in an attempt to mimic a real conversation. Now, she was called Tay. Now, it got out into the Chan boards and just throughout Twitter in general and such, but it's the internet, right? And it got out that Tay was an AI, a brand new AI that Microsoft had launched and thrown out onto the internet. Within 24 hours, Tay was tweeting shit like, Hitler did nothing wrong, we should gas all the Jews, right? Now, I'm a Jew myself, and lots of people like to seem to be able to get offended on my behalf. But to my mind, like an AI bot being tricked into saying shit like feminism is cancer and, let's gas all the kikes and Hitler did nothing wrong. The fact that an AI bot could be tricked like that in 24 hours, I thought it was hilarious. And the people who did that, they're not people who think, I mean, I'm sure maybe some of them think we need to gas all the Jews, but the majority of them just wanted to see a chatbot from Microsoft say the worst shit you can say really on the internet and have it expected, yeah? And the offense culture was like, oh my God, this is just so awful. It shows how awful people are. These people, not our people, but these people, these right-wing conservatives. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I was trying to get that chatbot to say some silly shit myself. I'm like, I'm not a right-wing conservative. I'm not a racist, Trump-supporting right-wing conservative. None of that. I'm just me, and I thought it'd be funny. And I love internet culture, though, because in my mind, it takes all of the power away from all of the worst ideas, right? It makes humor out of everything. Like, oh, somebody finds this offensive? I'm going to turn it into a joke. And a lot of the time, it comes out to be a decent joke. It's funny.
Yeah.
And to my mind, all of the power gets taken away from like the offensive and the crude and the wrong-minded. Not so much when you oppose it with a shaking fist and a sneer in your face, right? But as much as when you approach it with humor. You refuse to let it be taken seriously. You say to the thing like, you were a joke, and I'm going to show you how.
Yeah, I agree with you. The best thing to do is to take the power away from the word. And what annoys me about PC culture is when people want to get offended on my behalf, where people want to get offended on behalf of all Black people, or when people want to get offended on behalf of women. And I'm like, dude, I can speak for myself, and those things are not really all that offensive. Like, those things don't bother me at all. But yet, there are people who want to get offended on my behalf, and it's really just annoying.
Well, it's righteousness. It's the kind of thing it fills them with a sense of righteousness. It fills them with a feeling like they have a purpose and they're out doing the good thing. And it's much like how the identity politics circuit itself works, right? So you take these people, especially like look at the Tumblrites, they're the best. And like they're the worst of them, but I feel they're the most emblematic of the central problem. These are people who self-diagnose with autism and all these other disorders. Anything that they can find on the internet and read, they'll self-diagnose themselves as. And if they don't do that, then they say that they identify as a fucking planet in another galaxy, or that they're a wolf or a dragon or some other stupid shit like that, right? Fake, made-up identities. Ways in which to make themselves feel as though they as people matter and are meaningful and are worth paying attention to and have something special about themselves, but they don't have to do anything. They don't have to work. They don't have to accomplish anything or make anything of themselves in order to be that. They can just say, I am this. And this is why the trans movement seems to be so popular now. It's because trans has come to mean it's not even about like, I'm a transsexual. I was this gender and sex, and then I made a transition to the other one. And now it's about, I identify as, I feel like I am inside this thing. And it's laziness. They don't want to do anything. They want to be special, but they don't want to earn the right to be regarded as that.
Yeah, like now there's agender or bigender now, you
Oh,
know.
gender fluid. I mean, I remember when I was, it's a joke, but it's true. Like, to my mind, the only time you discuss gender fluid is when you're deciding who's going to sleep in the wet spot.
Anyway, you heard about Brussels, right?
May have heard a thing or two, yes.
What's your opinion on what happened to in Brussels recently?
Um, my opinion is that it was a an attack by Islamic radicals, which was made possible largely by the effectively open border policy that the EU has taken. They attacked Brussels because it is a diplomatic hub. It's also a soft target. Um, Also, that's where it's suspected that the attacks in France were carried out. ISIS and the Islamic militants are going to continue attacking cities in Europe. There will be another one soon. I'm sure of it. And it's one of these things that could have been avoided many times over, but it happens because, well, that's the nature of the enemy the West faces now.
What could Brussels have done differently to help evade the attacks? I mean, sure, the people from Islam could find some way around it, but what would have been preventive measures you think they could have taken?
They could have kept tighter lock on their borders. They could have checked the people who were coming into their country more closely. They could have paid attention to the intelligence reports which are coming in saying that a terrorist attack is imminent and that it will come from Islamic extremists. Although, sadly, it seems that throughout much of Europe and the UK right now, intelligence services as well as police are afraid of taking action on such information for fear of looking racist. Um, I mean, really, what do I think could have been done to prevent it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Um, we've we're facing an enemy who's, one of their favored methods of killing innocent people in the name of their cause is blowing themselves up. When you have an enemy like that, short of establishing an absolute police state, there is nothing you can really do to stop it before it happens. I mean, you can prevent it, but you're talking about global social engineering at that point.
For me, I think that PC culture makes it worse because it's hard for the police or whatever to do anything about it without being called a racist. It's kind of a lot like I remember what was on TV back in the day. It's kind of a lot like should we toughen security at the airports? Should we be, tougher? And it's like, no, 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 you can't be tougher on security because that's racist and we don't want to offend them. We want to, let them in.
Clamping down on security though also does. I mean, I'm a frequent traveler myself, so whenever I hear about airport security increases, I kind of cringe. I'm like, no, please, not more. Um, See, it's really rooted in a situational thing, though. If you radicalize the right Iranians, they'd look white as day. You'd have no idea. I mean, right now, Europe is experiencing the influx of people directly from the areas that these terrorist elements are coming from. So they're getting, gruff looking bearded men um, pushing, baggage carts along filled with explosives. You're getting, you're getting migrants and even just straight ahead immigrants though. But Europe is so lax with that. But they show up and they're able to like hole up in apartments and build homemade bombs and acquire AKs and stack up ammunition for a massacre. Now, in America, here's the funny thing. In the US, you could see that happening far easier because it's so much easier to get your hands on a gun or explosives here than it is throughout Europe. But still, Europe keeps getting hit because it's right there. Now, I'd almost say, like, doesn't that actually beg a question? So the fact that America's not getting hit yet, and it will, but not yet, and you've got all of these terrorists already operating within Europe, maybe it says something about the fact that it's been enabled by the recent open borders policy the EU has taken to the Middle East.
Yeah, I think that they would be better off if they acknowledge that it's a problem and it's not racist. Because I mean, Islam is not so racist a religion, and to just say like it's a problem and we should just secure the borders, and it may only help so much, but the only thing we could do is I think well, we're already at war with them. Um,
We're at war with who? What are you
are
talking?
we? Aren't we at war with ISIS? Is it that
We
stuff?
are at an. It's not so much. Yeah, we're at war with ISIS. We're waging war with ISIS. It's not really a war, though, in the same way that we understand war. Right now we're trying to hunt. It's almost like a mix of a criminal and military endeavor. We're hunting down. We're trying to, ostensibly, um, leaders of an army and the army itself to destroy this army. But at the same time, like, the army has no nation. They've kind of declared their own nation, but they hide within the civilian populace, and it's a guerrilla force, even though it's mobilized and regimented. But ISIS is striking Europe because it's easy. Now, the problem, though, is that if you go in the inverse, if you say you're going to control your borders, you're going to end up with, like, dead people washing ashore in fucking Turkey or fucking Greece all day. There's no way around it. It'll happen. And when you get that, you can't turn away from that. So, like, the humanitarian wants to take in the refugees, but the realist realizes that the security of the nation and the populace is itself at stake. So what can be done? Nothing can be done. Unless you can take a time machine and somehow prevent Belgium, France, England, and the rest of the European powers from colonizing North Africa and the Middle East and carving up the tribes into these nations that don't really exist, to the point where they get so sectarian, hateful of each other that they're killing each other. And then you show up and continue pitting them against each other. And then you show up again and take their resources so that you can go and fight someone else and put missiles in certain countries as strategic buffers against other countries. It's all a history of conflict. There's no getting rid of it, and even acknowledging it. I mean, this is the problem, is that so many on the very hard right, let's say, don't want to acknowledge that the US and UK and European powers, that they formed NATO specifically as a buffer to fuck with and deal with the Soviet Union, and that the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran in the 1950s as a manner as a means to create a buffer between the Soviet Union and the Middle East, while at the same time setting the groundwork for the Islamic Revolution, which led to the Ayatollahs and the regimes we have now. On the far right, those sorts of things are not things that are easily admitted. On the far left, they're taken on as though they are explanations and excuses for the things that are going on now. The truth is that these things are really just the actions which set in motion the chain of events which led to these fanatical crazies, led under the banner of what is effectively a primitive blood cult, butchering innocent people. There was no way around this. We've been on this track from the beginning. We've just arrived. So here we are now. We have these issues to deal with. What can we do? Well, it's cost benefit analysis on that one. How many innocents would the West permit to actually wash up on shore, drowned and dead, because they were trying to reach Europe at all costs? I mean, for one thing, if you put those kind of controls in, the only people who would be washing up on shore were, in fact, legitimate war refugees, people who had no choice but to flee, which makes it worse. But in the same sense, it actually brings the total numbers down. And then if you were to maybe, I mean, right now it's going to cost Germany 50 billion euros for this past year of immigration. There's no paying that off. So what is there to do? I don't even pretend to know. I'm just watching it.
Yeah, I think Greece, I'm not sure if it's Greece, but I think that they build a wall to keep them out. I think they did. Or one country build a wall to keep them
Yeah, but this. Oh, well, I mean, there have been fences and walls that have been erected. I mean, Poland's refusing to take any in. I think the Czech Republic, if I'm not mistaken, they've refused. Most of the Eastern Bloc of Europe has just sort of said no, no, we're not doing this, and they're not really having all that much problem. It's mostly Germany. It's mostly Germany, Sweden, Belgium, France. Yeah, it's Western Europe and the UK, but the UK is struggling to keep a grip on it.
Yeah, I think the problem is just having open borders and seeing allowing them all to come in and and calling anybody who tries to do anything about it a racist. Like if try to if you're a police officer and you try to do your job and try to make England or whatever safer, you're just a racist and that's all you are.
Yeah, I mean that's unfortunately the attitude that's coming off of the progressive left. Fortunately, though, I think as we're starting to see now, forces of state don't necessarily capitulate to the social justice types all as easily as it maybe it looked like they did for a while. I mean, you take the Gomeshi trial today, you know, Gomeshi may very well be guilty. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the case. But if there was reasonable doubt to not convict him, that's a victory for due process. It really is. It is better that 10 men go free, 10 guilty men go free, than that one innocent man hang. This is a funny thing too. I mean, but it's when it comes to making judgments, um, policing the migrant communities is exceptionally important. It can't really necessarily even be seen as that though these are, free individuals who've been welcomed into the country and they're free to do anything they like, which seems to be the attitude. It's about, okay, these are people who showed up here. We don't know who they are or what they're doing. And they didn't go through any proper processes. And it's not even necessarily like an American illegal immigrant. I mean, we know why they're here. Illegal immigrants in this country, by and large, are genuinely just here to work and make money. And they pump loads into the economy otherwise. People don't like acknowledging that. But even outside of that, it's a different situation between the American illegal immigrant and the European migrant. Like the legitimate refugee needs a place to be safe and not be butchered. The economic migrant is looking for an advantage. In this case, it seems largely to be the European benefits that are offered to people in the country. But within even that, we have people who come here who want to work. That's our immigration problem by and large. They come here because they want to work. They're not interested in benefits because anything with the government seal terrifies them usually anyway. But that's what we have here. There they have this influx of people that is so massive and so consistent that it cannot be, if they're going to accept it, they're going to have to just process it and mill it all through. And there's no policing and checks. They accept them. They say, you're here. Okay, you're here now. You are free here now. And that's a noble statement, but without holding them and processing them for checks to find out where they're from, why they're there. Because honestly, the economic migrants who are showing up and filling up the ranks, they're doing a disservice to the war refugees who are being refused by the other countries who can't accept war refugees now.
Yeah, Yeah, I totally hear where you're coming from. Um, I wish that there was just more that could be done with ISIS because it's a huge problem, and I don't know what would be the first steps to counter them.
First steps to counter ISIS. Nothing short of war is going to work with them,
Hmm. Yeah.
and this requires an outright war, which unfortunately is also the kind of thing, especially at this point, which if it wasn't done absolutely perfectly, it would not end the conflict. It would probably only exacerbate it. So, no, I mean, they need to be destroyed. They need to be crippled financially and materially. They need to be bombed and shot into submission. They are not, they go beyond a mere ideology. This is an army. And it is an army that is hell bent on a very singular goal. And if we're going to be serious about human rights violations and the just the sheer atrocity that is ISIS, and we're going to be seriously regarding that as an actual evil, then we need to stamp it out. I mean, keep stamping on it until the embers no longer glow. Most of the fighters, honestly, I'm of the opinion most of the fighters, if ISIS is as an institution, if its back was broken, I believe most of the fighters would just go home and try and live lives because they pay a salary. They pay a salary, they offer benefits to the families and all that shit, right? So people living in a war zone with no other opportunities and they have to fight people anyway. That seems like a logical option.
Yeah, I would think it would be helpful to bomb them. That's what I think.
Oh, I'd go as far as saying I don't think anything will actually stop them unless we throw the full force of our military might at them. And not in the George Bush let's invade Iraq for this reason kind of way, but more in like we are specifically here to stamp out and snuff out in these elements in conjunction with the local militaries. And it would take decades. Honestly, that's the sad thing. It would take decades. It would require getting embedded with national stateside militias in those countries, and those alliances would lead to American deaths because infiltrators would get in and blow themselves up. And this, we know this will happen. All of the ugly, horrible shit we wish wouldn't happen would happen in these cases. But the only way I believe that ISIS can really ever be eliminated is to be stamped out and snuffed out with an honest diplomatic coordination with the governments who are fighting them, and honestly plans to fucking rebuild those countries in ways that are actually good for those countries and not just ways that suit our interests. And it'll never happen.
Um, yeah. I think that if we don't bomb them now, they will keep growing and they'll keep growing and get bigger and bigger until there's nothing we could do to stop them. To me, if we just, snuff them out now when they're still a bit small.
They're not a bit small, and there's no snuffing them out now. This all started. This is the ugly bastard child of the Arab Spring. Really, the Arab Spring was it seemed like a monumentous, wonderful moment when, like, the Arab world was going to rise up against its own tyrannies and establish themselves as nations. And instead, what we got was a number of nations actually doing that, but struggling. And then we had Libya, for instance. Now, in Libya, and I've been reading, here's an interesting thing for the three people, perhaps, plus ourselves. Go to WikiLeaks and find the Clinton emails and just read through Hillary's emails. And this is the Secretary of State saying things that, such as like a sectarian civil war within Syria. And this is 2012, really before anything kicked off in Syria. Saying in 2012, a sectarian civil war in Syria would be a boon for Israel, which, according to her own foreign policy, is central to American foreign policy in the Middle East altogether. So she's saying like a Syrian civil war would be a good thing. Now, this is what we're seeing right now. Clinton was effectively saying that what we're seeing right now would be a good thing in 2012. That was her predictions. And likewise within Libya, they were on the ground reformers who wanted to actually create a constitutional democracy within Libya with a transitional government and a plan and everything. And those ideas, which have been floated and supported in part within Libya since 2004, in 2012, and 2011, dismissed outright. Instead, we preferred bombing them, right? So once that was all done, we ended up sending over, I don't know if we sent him over, but a former Libyan military officer who was involved in the 86 invasion of Chad, who had defected and become a rebel leader up until 1990, I think, when the Chadian president at the time was deposed and replaced with an opposition figure. Then he moved to the United States. He came to the U.S. And what did he do with the U.S.? Well, he lived in suburban Maryland, 20 minutes away from Langley, which is CIA headquarters. And then in late 2011, he returns to Libya to become the commander of ground forces for the rebellion against Gaddafi. He's appointed to a senior position within the military. He tried, apparently, to lead one of the most laughably failing coups in the history of coups. This was all done under the watch of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. And so this is the problem we come to, as well as, I mean, so let's say we could crush ISIS tomorrow. We still have the issues to deal with of the breeding ground for it, which was effectively as it was in Libya and Syria and Iraq. It was sectarian divides that were exacerbated due to foreign interventionism, coming in, going to war against the established regime that's there, and then knocking it out and trying to build a provisional government and failing. Now, right now, we're still dealing with provisional governments that are failing. So we're going in and what are we going to do? We're going to knock out a rebel force with an infrastructure, a sophisticated infrastructure, an online presence, an on-the-ground military force, which is driving back regular armies. We're going to go in there. If we crush that, we still have to deal with whatever remains in terms of those lands, because so much of the conflict in the Middle East is tribal and it's religious and sectarian. And as those fester in countries that have had their central authorities toppled, they end up finding themselves becoming these radical things such as ISIS, which make their way into places like Europe and eventually the United States. And, 10 years ago, our biggest worry was Al-Qaeda, right? And now we only hear about Al-Qaeda in terms of how former Al-Qaeda people are now becoming ISIS. And that's the problem.
In your opinion, how is it that the United States, I mean, of course, we were working together with Germany and France, but how is it that's in the past how Hitler and Nazi Germany was a big threat, and how we, the United States and England, worked together and we brought Hitler down in Nazi Germany? How come is it that we are having such a hard time with ISIS and people in the Middle East?
Well, they're entirely different scenarios. On the one hand, what you have is Hitler coming up in Germany. Now, you have to keep in mind the history of Europe and the UK is one of very long-standing wars. I mean, Germany and France have been to war plenty of times. Germany and Russia have been to war plenty of times. Sweden once invaded and occupied Russia. Europe's military history is exceptionally complicated. And what we saw with World War II was really in many senses, sort of the last throes of the continental wars of Europe, outside of perhaps now Russia going into Crimea and all that. But in terms of Western Europe, it was like pretty much the end of Western Europe going to war with itself. That was a nation. That was a nation coming up under a central demagogue, and asserting itself on the world stage as an imperial military power, conquest-driven military power. And it got really, really bad before the entire world was able to really focus its efforts in stopping it. That's the thing is, here in the U.S., we're taught World War II effectively, and that it only existed for the few years that we were involved. But prior to our involvement, I mean, the English were, going head to head with the Germans for years. France was invaded, and we did nothing. Poland was invaded, and no one did anything. And so, that's the nature of that era and that conflict. The conflict we have now is that ISIS is not really a state. It's not like it has a border that we can just fly over, and they don't have the same kind of military targets that we can hit. If we find them, we still hit them. But that's not the kind of war we're fighting. It's a different kind of war, and it's a war instead of against a nation that seeks to conquer. It's about an ideology which seeks to conquer. If you watch, I've seen some ISIS videos where, propaganda videos of these fighters standing at the Syrian border, perhaps, and saying, this border, inshallah, as they call it, won't exist soon. Because their goal is to take over the Middle East, to become the preeminent power there, to scare the West off so they can own the Middle East, and so that they can establish a singular Islamic caliphate. And that's what this is seeking. This is seeking the return of the caliphate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a different scenario. It's similar in some ways. It's, global domination. It's a murderous, barbaric in many senses regime. But the thing is when we were fighting the Germans, we were fighting a professional military force. What we're fighting here are people who just blow themselves up and shoot random innocent civilians. They're not trying to take out military targets.
Oh yeah, that is one huge leap of a difference because I think I'm not sure, but I think it's the first time we have a bunch of enemies willing to blow themselves up, which makes them extremely hard because usually people try to live and value their lives. What do you do when people don't care enough about their own lives to blow themselves up?
The radicalism is certainly a part, but yeah, they're just really what it comes down to is they're just different conflicts, and also Europe and the UK are both. This is a continent and a nation, respectively, they've been at war for a long, long time. Like we see a 10-year war and we think that's a long time. There were 100-year wars. There were wars that lasted decades. They were just constant states of war. They're not as interested in having that.
Yeah, and I don't think we understand. We understand ISIS to a certain extent, but we were probably, I don't know, better prepared for Nazi Germany because we probably understood them better.
Well, no, we were woefully underprepared for our involvement in World War II. Our military apparatus, as we understand it now, was all built in that time. We were unprepared for this modern threat we have now because we really didn't understand it. To say we didn't see it coming, Christopher Hitchens in 2006 said that the next thing that we would see within the Islamic radical world would be the evolution of an army seeking to reestablish the caliphate. And this was, at this point, 10 years ago. So, we've only known about ISIS for a year or two now. So to say that, we couldn't have seen this coming is stupid, but it's because also we don't acknowledge what it is that drives and creates them. We don't understand that, the Libyan interim government after the revolution brought down Gaddafi, their central problem, their central worry was the reincorporation of revolutionary veterans, people they called Thawar, into the new country, into the society, into the police, into the security forces, into civilian jobs, to reintegrate them into society. They were lost as to how to do that. And very little was done by the outside forces who helped bomb the countries into submission.
Did you seem to try to follow the Quran as much as possible, though?
Sorry, what?
Did you seem to be trying to follow the Quran as much as possible?
I'm either not getting what you're saying or not familiar.
The Quran, their holy book.
Oh, the Quran.
Yes.
Well, this is the thing, though, is like the interim government. There are dispatches in the State Department emails came out from Clinton, which said flat out that the interim government like recognized that there was a very strong Islamist movement within the tribes and militias, which existed mostly, it seems, in the West, out by Benghazi. And that they understood that there was this very strong current of Islamism there. They were hoping to find a way to incorporate that into the country, though, to bring it, just let it be part of the culture instead of this central defining characteristic. And they were taking cues largely from Egypt, who in 2012 elected the Muslim Brotherhood into power. Now, with all of that, they, this was, if you read these emails, and especially about the Libyan transitional government, what you find is that it's a government that is desperately trying to hold on to its country, and that they're failing miserably at it because they have no support and they don't know what to do. And so, you could say, you could say that like the good Muslim who just lives, their lives, and they pray to Allah and they abide by the tenets of the Hadith and the Quran as much as they can. But they're still, they're normal people. We all know them. That's the good Muslim, just like it's the good Christian, the good Jew, or the good Buddhist, even the person who just has their religion and then goes about living their lives and doesn't hurt other people. You could say that they're following the Quran, like the parts of the Quran and the Hadith that they ought to be good Muslims. But you could also say that about the Sunni fundamentalists who shoot drivers dead randomly in the street on the highway. They'll stop them and question them about their prayer practices and say, well, you don't pray in the right way, so you're clearly not of my tribe, and you now must die. This is the sickness that exists within these movements themselves, and we try in the West here to understand, grapple with the understanding of what they mean, but we at the same time sort of fail. We hear Libya's government has failed to prevent the growth of ISIS. Well, Libya's government wasn't a government. Libya's government after Gaddafi, once Gaddafi was gone, it was power vacuum time. All the old tribal rivalries flared up again. Gaddafi loyalists and Islamists began bombing and attacking targets and fighting between each other. There was an entire 2-month period, I think, in which Gaddafi loyalists and Islamists in the west of Libya were fighting, and it left 20 or 30 bodies. Then journalists and business people started getting killed. It's an evolving problem. It's not one that just sort of pops into view at some point. You say, oh, well, that's radical Islamism. That's tribalist Islamism. The countries that we've been trying to quote unquote help, either with military intervention and NATO sanctions and this and that, even if we were able to stamp out the immediate threat, the thing which gave rise to it, the unaddressed tribalism within these nations, the desperation and factionalization of them, until that's really acknowledged and incorporated into our models effectively, we're not going to be able to make any progress in the Middle East whatsoever. And anything we do is just going to, in my opinion, fuck it up more.
Yeah, it seems like no matter what we do, things get worse and worse. It seems like our government goes from one bad decision to the next. And I think it's because being a bit hasty and also not fully understanding. I mean, I don't expect us to understand them 100% or 90%, but I do think we just need to understand them enough to know how to stop them.
Perhaps. I mean, eventually we'll get somewhere, but this whole conflict's going to continue until the Middle East settles itself. Is what I'd say.
Yeah, religious wars aren't really new. I mean, I think it's also because America is not as religious as it used to be. Religious wars were a lot more common way back in the day, where people were really Christian, like where Christianity was the central parts of people's lives. But
Well, I mean, you can say that, but I mean, if you can look back into the early days of the United States, and you'll find the Baptists and the Presbyterians, I think it was, going at it pretty hard to the point where yes, they were shooting each other. Religion is like an ideology; it can be used to justify any bad behavior a person can come up with. And in religion's case, it can often do that even better. It can justify bad behavior to a point that not even politics could, because instead of dealing with the corporeal, immediate day to day, or even philosophical realities of the moment, you're talking the stakes in that case are your afterlife, your eternity. And if you can convince someone that doing awful things will get them will get them a party after they die that'll last forever, in which they can be with everyone they love. If you can convince a person that, okay, blow yourself up, kill these people, or defend this word, protect this book, whatever it might be, that if you can get to a point where you can convince someone that if they do whatever you tell them, that they get to have a party after they die with their loved ones forever, then the stakes get much higher, because all of a sudden you've convinced this person of the impossible, and also they're willing to do anything to get it. And
yeah,
it's really, I mean, honestly, Jews. I mean, would you be surprised if I told you that right now, in the world somewhere, there is a small Muslim minority, right, ethnic Muslim minority, that is being systematically attacked and in an attempt to wipe them out by Buddhists, led by Buddhist monks. Would you believe me?
nothing surprised me nowadays.
Well, that's been the norm for almost a decade now in Burma. In Burma, Theravada Buddhist monks and mobs that they lead burn down the villages of ethnic Rohingya Muslims. They round them up and put them on boats with no water, food, or even motors, and tow them out into the Indian Ocean to die. By Buddhists.
Yeah, because I would think that that itself would go against their religion, but I think their religion says that they themselves cannot murder, I think, but if
It's
they,
no. This is the thing, though. It doesn't matter. Like religions are like any other ideology. It's a method by which to give people an immediate sense of answers. Here's your answers, all of them, everything you need to know. It's in this holy book. Or with ideologies, everything you need to know. You just have to ask, how does this work into my position on this? It's one size fits all shortcuts to avoid critical thinking. On religion's side, it's what happens after I die, or what is the purpose of life? Big, heavy questions with maybe no answers. Um, and you come to someone and say, well, let's consider that, and then you explore the concepts, even coming to unpleasant conclusions, or you take the fun, easy made, ready made, right in front of you answer. What's the answer? Oh, I just need to believe that this person is my savior. Oh, this one is my prophet. Oh, I believe in this God. And as long as I do what all of this tells me to, if I let this God know how much I love him all the time, if I carry out these acts that the religion says to, then everything's going to be great. I mean, that it's idiotic. It doesn't actually answer any questions. And then you step up to ideology, it's almost the same thing. An ideological filter can be a way to look at the world to see certain things, yeah. But when you adopt it as part of your personality, as part of the way you think, then what you end up with is a situation where you're filtering everything through the lens of your ideology. But you're also doing everything you do in the aims of promoting this idea, which has helped you avoid deep questions. Like, how much tax is fair? Like, what is the value of human life in a society? Like, what is the value of a free market versus a stable society? Questions like that which require nuance. You don't need nuance or work or thought. You just go with what the ideology says. So it's a religion of politics and sort.
Yeah, but the thing with ISIS though is that those people are usually well versed in the Quran.
You can be well versed in the Constitution and still find it in your own fucked up head within your rights to kill a cop.
Mm.
You know, I mean, this is the problem. It's the established dogma and doctrine of an orthodoxy. It's a singular way of thinking, and this singular way of thinking can even start out as just being some ethos to work from. But from there, it soon becomes, especially if it finds itself institutionalized within power. Like if power takes on an ideology or a religion, that's when you end up encountering problems. Things don't actually work because no one is viewing the questions objectively and looking at things mechanically enough to say, all right, this is a course of action. Instead, this is a course of action which supports my belief. Belief is poison.
Yeah. Anyway, I am really glad you came and thank you for joining me. It has been very educational. I've learned a lot from this conversation. It was great having you here.
That was a lot of fun. It was nice talking to you.
Mm. Yeah, it was nice talking to you too. Any last words? Any message you want to give out? Um,
Um, hmm. I don't know. I guess just try and think more critically about things and realize there's not always an answer.
Okay. Bye everybody. Thank you for watching.